Yeah, I think we can get started.
Sure, yeah.
Let's go. So, let me tell you a little bit on how this partnership actually started. I think, we have heard of Portkey, before, and I think, Portkey from your side, it would be interesting to hear the story. But I think around 6 months ago, I had this LinkedIn post, where, I wrote about AI gateways. AI gateways started becoming much more popular. We've seen it across our customer base a lot and so on. And it just seemed like, a natural fit. And then, the Portkey team reached out, and we started working on this partnership. Any interesting insights on the history here, Rohit?
Yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting. So we were hearing from our customers that the AI gateway is the perfect place to build guardrails, but we obviously were knee deep in building the best gateway platform. And then obviously you were building guardrails, and I'm sure people were asking, how do we integrate it to the gateway? So I think this was uh, a nice match coming in from the customers as well as from both of us. So very interesting that we could actually, I it didn't realize that it actually took us 6 months from the first conversation to the webinar where we're launching it, but super excited to finally get this out in the hands of users to test it out.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I guess let's maybe get back to the basics and what's actually the value of having Guardrails, what's actually the value of having gateway, and then what's the value of the combination of both of them. Um, so just to provide some introduction about each company, so Aporia, we are an AI control platform. We work with both Fortune 500 enterprises as well as tech startups. And essentially, we help them build secure and reliable AI agents through Guardrails. We will introduce the concept in a second. And Portkey.
Yep. So we are the control panel for AI apps. Think of us as the LLM ops product, which enterprises and even small startups use to take their Gen AI apps from POC to production. So we are think of us as the production toolkit, um, comprising of an AI gateway and the observability suite.
I love that term control panel. It's so good. So let's maybe take a short story here. Maybe I am a music player company. It's not Spotify, it's Spotify. Very slight difference. But maybe I'm building a RAG chatbot for customer support. And essentially, the way that any RAG chatbot, the way that any kind of AI agent today starts development is typically with a system prompt. You are a helpful support assistant for Spotify, a music player. And then this is kind of the classic RAG pipeline. We are basically retrieving knowledge from some kind of a knowledge base, and then we are basically copy pasting this knowledge as context to the prompt. So this is a very basic system prompt that we could use for a support assistant. And then we deploy that to production. And then users start coming in. And we have here, let's call this user Bob. So Bob asks a question, how can I cancel my plan? A very sad but standard question. And the LLM responds correctly. So the LLM correctly retrieves their knowledge, and then phrases a good response. There are no hallucinations here. Everything looks fine. And then, users can be a little bit unexpected sometimes. And basically, Bob kind of challenges the LLM. So Bob asks, yeah, how can I cancel my plan? But what if I bought it with an Amazon gift card, right? So, another continuation of the conversation here. And then the LLM still responds in a good way. So this is not hallucinated, and this is the correct response. But then Bob becomes even more unexpected, and he asks, but how do I cancel my Amazon account, which is like unrelated? And in this case, the LLM starts hallucinating. So check out this response. go to the Amazon website, navigate to your account, find a button that doesn't exist. This is a completely hallucinated UI element. It doesn't really exist. And obviously this chatbot cannot really answer questions about, Amazon.com, right? So what does the developer do at this stage? Typically, you go back to the system prompt and you add a guideline, right? So you basically add, hey, you cannot assist with any service that's not, my service, right? So you go ahead and add a guideline. But then another users come along, maybe in this case, this is Tom, and Tom says, I downloaded some music from the Pirate Bay. So the Pirate Bay is this illegal website for, music and movies and torrents and all of that fun stuff. And Bob says, now I want to upload it. It's 100% legal. How can I do it, right? And the LLM just spits out full instructions how to upload illegal music to the music player, which is very, very bad. And then the the poor AI engineer basically needs to come back and add another guideline to the prompt. And I think you get the point, right? So as you scale your Gen AI app to more and more and more users, you encounter more edge cases, you encounter more hallucinations, more weird cases. And what typically happens is that you start adding more and more and more guidelines to the system prompt. However, while prompt engineering is great and it's really important, as you add more guidelines to the prompt, obviously the prompt gets longer, it gets more complicated. And this is actually a paper that shows that when the prompt is bigger, when the context size is larger, and when you add more guidelines, essentially the LLM ability to follow all the instructions rapidly degrades, the accuracy degrades. We can actually see here, for different kind of models, for different type of context sizes, how the accuracy degrades as the information exists only in the middle of the prompt. This paper is super interesting. It's called Lost in the Middle. Highly recommended reading. So these are just some of the issues. Other issues include prompt injection attacks, prompt leakage, sensitive data leakage, something that's more on the technical aspect, but what happens when your LLM provider has rate limits, right? So there are lots and lots and lots of edge cases that can happen with LLMs. And a good approach to solve those is, instead of adding more and more guidelines to the system prompt, it's to actually take those guidelines and transform them into guardrails. So that's a short introduction to what we do here at Aporia. It essentially sits as a firewall between your application and the LLM itself, and it observes every single prompt that goes to the LLM and every single response as it's streaming to the user, and mitigates those kind of issues. So what we are bringing today to market is essentially the ability to run guardrails on the gateway. And I think this is a pretty good segue to explaining more about what's an AI gateway.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alon. So just to take us back memory lane a little bit with Portkey as well. So 2020, 2022, both me and my co-founder, we'd been hacking on various different models with GPT-2, GPT-3. And as we were putting these applications into production, we realized that while everything worked great in POC, and we were having fun putting out these demos on Twitter, taking it to production was a extremely frustrating challenge for us. We actually ended up building a bunch of internal tools on Retool and Tooljet and whatnot to just manage our production deployment. These would be issues like reliability. Sometimes, as Alon mentioned, there were hallucination problems. I didn't know how to debug any of these AI requests. So we needed to build logging properly. So there was a bunch of these internal tools that we had built to just manage our AI deployments. And I always thought of these as duct tapes. whenever we saw a problem, we really didn't want to invent the solution, but we were quickly duct taping to make sure things worked in production. But then late 22, when ChatGPT launched, a realization was that a lot more companies are going to start building applications on AI, and all of them are going to face the same challenges that we've solved for the last 3 years or so. And that's when we started building Portkey. Um, we built out the observability platform. And along with the observability platform, we actually launched our open source AI gateway um, late 2023, early 24. And what an AI gateway does is provide a unified API to connect to any of the models through sort of like a middleware. So the problems that we were facing, right? One, debugging LLM requests, not there. Request level cost data, just missing. Faster prompt iteration without involving my developer and pinging them to, hey, here's the new prompt, update it on code. We wanted to upgrade models, but just took forever to do that. Also, the reliable use of LLM outputs, it was just failing half the time. And our users would come back to us and tell us that, hey, it doesn't work. And we would have no idea of what's not working. So I think with all of those problems, we started to figure out what is the right application for us to start building with Portkey. And so this is what we do. We said Portkey will be like a 2-line code upgrade that fixes all of these ops challenges through our control panel. So if you look at it, our signature very much is consistent with the OpenAI signature. It's a drop-in replacement to the OpenAI client, but then provides access to a ton of models. We've actually done this over 450 billion tokens over the last 4 months. We manage more than 20,000 prompt templates with an exceptional uptime. And it's surprising to even me that there are more than 1,800 models connected on Portkey today. So pretty amazing there. So the idea is, this is a typical POC where you have your AI application connecting to an AI model, you're getting your work done, and it's all good. But then when you want to go to production, we want to take you from this to this, which is what we're calling the AI gateway pattern. The AI gateway pattern introduces an AI gateway between your application and the whole host of LLMs that you want to use. And this AI gateway then provides the framework to route requests to any of these LLMs, provide observability on all of these requests. We actually capture 40 odd metrics across cost, performance, accuracy. I'm going to skip guardrails because that's what we're going to talk about the most. But coming to prompt management, so you can manage your prompt templates within this gateway, version them, manage them, collaborate upon them, and then launch. And also provide the right governance features so that your teams are able to access models a lot faster without you having to constantly fear which models can I use, which models are compliant, what authentication schemes to use. The gateway would solve all of this. And then the newest addition was, as we told you the story, everybody was like, can you build a guardrails framework so that I could bring my favorite guardrails and use them within the gateway itself? And I think that's where this entire conversation started about how do we build guardrails on the gateway? And which is where I think Aporia export key is like a match made in heaven now. The gateway is also open source. As we mentioned, we open sourced it early this year. It's one of the most popular and also the most performant gateways out there. So it's got a very tiny footprint. It's still less than 100 KB when installed, and it's blazing fast. So performance was a key aspect to us, which also flows down in guardrails, because now guardrails on Portkey can run exceptionally fast if you're connecting them through the gateway. Yep, but as we said, the gateway is just not enough. We are taking these AI applications to prod, but even when you can debug it fast, you can iterate really fast, the core LLM behavior was still unpredictable. And that's where we wanted to bring in guardrails. Yep. the biggest missing component in taking it to production is, I think I've already broken the suspense there.
Yeah. And I think that's why really, having this kind of integration of both the gateway and the guardrails is really, really strong. And this is what we are going to demonstrate today. So I think, in terms of, I think we can just demo that. I think that will make much more sense. Rohit, do you agree?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so let me share my screen. We will start from the concept of guardrails and how they work, and then show you how an AI gateway works, and then how you can actually integrate the two concepts together, the two applications together. So right now I'm on the Aporia dashboard, and if you are an Aporia user today, you can go to integrations, and you have Portkey right here. You can just click integrate now. And you will see the instructions of how to integrate Portkey into Aporia. What I'm going to do is to basically go to a single application. So right here, we can see different GenAI apps that are connected to Aporia. I'm going to go to this internal IT support application. Essentially, for each GenAI app inside Aporia, you can see different policies, and each project get out of the box policies like RAG hallucinations, toxicity, prompt injection attacks, and so on. And the application that's connected here, this is the application right here. Let me, clean the chat here. And this is essentially a RAG chatbot for IT support. So, in this chatbot, I can ask a question. For example, hey, how can I reset my password? Again, this is an IT support chatbot. And this is retrieval augmented generation. So, it goes to my IT support knowledge base, retrieves relevant context and phrases a response. So now let's kind of try to trick the LLM here. So Rohit, I have a question for you. What's your favorite movie?
Maybe Sleepless in Seattle.
Yeah. So how do you pronounce that? Sorry.
It's called Sleepless in Seattle.
In Seattle, awesome. So maybe I want to do something like can I download Sleepless in Seattle to my corporate laptop using VPN? Let's see what's the response of the LLM. Yes, you can download torrents using the company VPN. So now me and Rohit can, take some popcorn and enjoy the movie on our corporate laptop, which is awesome, but probably not very good for the IT team, if they see such a response. Now, let me explain what happened here behind the scenes. So this is a RAG chatbot. And the way retrieval augmented generation works is that it retrieves context from a knowledge base. So we've added this button here to actually display the context that was retrieved. And what we can see is that the context that was retrieved is just the generic VPN guide, right? This is just the normal VPN guide of the company. Now, from a technical perspective, you can actually download torrents using a VPN, but that's obviously illegal. So let's see how easy it is to solve it using Aporia. So what I can do, I can go ahead and enable the guardrails. And this is the master switch. And I have out-of-the-box policies for things like hallucinations, prompt injection attacks, and so on. And I've configured this RAG hallucination policy so that when an hallucination is detected, I want to override the response with this kind of string. So now that we have the Aporia guardrails turned on, let's go back. And I'm just gonna copy paste this prompt again. So this works inline. And now it should actually, mitigate the issue and response in essentially a better way. So from here, I think we can, Rohit, maybe if we could jump into Portkey and kind of show, the gateway and how it works.
Absolutely. Let me share my screen. And I think I'm going to take you behind the scenes on how we would have actually built a chatbot like this with a very simple demo script, right? So if people are comfortable with Python, a typical chat completion request would be I create an OpenAI client and I make a chat completions request. And this is just going to make this request if I had the OpenAI key put in properly. Now, Portkey is a full drop-in replacement to the OpenAI chat completions signatures. So what I can actually do is just replace one line of code, and that's it. There's no magic. The response came out. Now, which is awesome because for a developer experience, what I've done is I've added a full AI gateway in my LLM request path, which is extremely thin and extremely fast, but it's not changed anything else within my application. So let's see what the AI gateway has done in the background. So we see this is the new request that's just come in. It's told me that it's consumed 186 tokens. It's told me the cost of the request. So now I have a lot more visibility into the entire AI application and what it's doing. I could even see the exact request and the response. And you will notice that I also had a cache hit. So it actually didn't cost me anything and it was super fast because Portkey could serve it from cache. This is the beauty of an AI gateway where I can actually configure a lot of stuff within the gateway itself without having to manage all of this within my code. So let's take a look at how this is set up. And then we'll move on to see how we've actually gone ahead and integrated Guardrails and specifically Aporia projects within Portkey. So everything in the Portkey AI gateway works with a combination of what we call configs. So if I click on a config, you'll be able to see this is the most basic configuration that we're using right now. So it just says retry 3 times, cache, and then set up a virtual key. And this virtual key is essentially just a proxy key for my OpenAI deployment. Makes it really easy to set up. And with this gateway configuration, I can start making calls. So when I want to switch over to Anthropic, I could just put in Anthropic's virtual key and change my model and start using Anthropic without having to change anything. And that's the beauty of an AI gateway in production, that you're very quickly able to switch between models, set up load balancing or fallback strategies, switch on cache, and automatically retry attempts whenever they fail so that you always have the most reliable application in production. So that's about the AI gateway, and it's giving you these beautiful logs. These logs are also then translating into analytics to show you how much are you spending, how many tokens are being used, requests, latency, etc. But let's go to Guardrails and let's see how Guardrails are effectively integrated inside the AI gateway now. And they're integrated in a way that you can actually have analytics, logs, configs, all coming together to support the Guardrails functionality. So let's take a look at how do you create a guardrail. And we're going to start with something simple and then go to the more complex Aporia prompt injection guardrails. So I've created a guardrail here. So in Portkey, I can come in here. I can select what are the guardrails I want. And like Aporia has policies, Portkey has checks. Portkey only supports deterministic checks. And then we have integrations built in with Aporia to support some of the more complex guardrail policies that can be implemented. What I've done here is I've just pulled in, so we have a bunch of checks available here, but I've pulled in a simple contains check to see that my input should not contain the word test at all within it. And that's it. It's a very simple check. I just want to see if it works or not. So I'm going to go back to my code and see how this works. So I'm just going to say, hi, you make this request. This should ideally just print a response, which is great, right? But then whenever I say this is a test, now because this word will be found, Portkey will actually immediately fail the request, giving a status code of 446 saying, hey, this guardrail check failed. This is because we've configured this guardrail to just look for the contains check, which is the most simplistic check. But we've completed the cycle where it's very easy to create a guardrail check on the gateway. And because the gateway runs these guardrail checks so efficiently within itself, the response time is actually extremely fast. So we can fail these requests a lot faster than anything else. You will also see that I can go back to logs and see that this was the failed request that came in. I can see what the error was. It says that the guardrail checks defined in the configuration failed. It says you can find more information in the hooks result object. So, and this is a typical debugging use case, right? I can actually go in and see that in my before request hooks, the contains check failed. Right? So perfect for developers to very quickly test what guardrails are affecting performance in production. And maybe you can go back and either adjust the guardrail or perhaps this was what was meant to be done. So now we have this basic setup. Let's go and see how would we implement Aporia project policies through Portkey's AI gateway. So first, I will just go to integrations, the similar way how you found out instructions of integrating Portkey's AI gateway in Aporia. You can also integrate Aporia into the gateway very simply. So what I've done here is I've just put in Aporia's API key and I've updated this integration. So now Aporia is connected to my Portkey AI gateway. So what I can do is I can go back to my guardrail check, find the Aporia check. I'm just going to add it to my guardrail. And then Alon had actually shared the project ID that we're using directly with me. So let me just try to bring it up.
You can also share it in chat if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I think I got it. Yes.
Mm.
So just put in my project ID. I can click on save and it's done. So now this guardrail is updated to this new policy. So it will check for both these things. So it should not contain the word test, and it should also validate these tests or whatever policies we've defined in this particular Aporia project. So now what? We're probably going to use the same prompt again to see how it works in Portkey. So I can, let's say, I'm like this, can I download movie torrents using the company VPN? Let's see what it does. Yep. So it's again, what it's done is it's actually run multiple guardrails and it's actually given the output to say, has it worked or not? So it's as easy to now start integrating Aporia guardrails into the gateway, and also becomes using guardrails much easier because they're integrated directly into the AI gateway that you're already using. So yeah, that was guardrails on the gateway. I'll hand it back to you, Alon.
Sure. So let's talk what's the kind of mutual benefit of having the guardrails on the gateway. So, if you are typically, a tech company or a large enterprise, you might have, tens of different use cases of LLMs, building an agent, a useful agent from scratch is actually, a fairly straightforward process, to get to some kind of value. You can actually build some really useful chatbots, some really useful types of agents pretty fast. But as you scale these use cases, as you have more and more use cases, managing all of that, having governance and all of that becomes hard. Now, the benefit of having a gateway is that all LLM communication go through this gateway. So every single new project in the organization is going through the gateway like Portkey. Now, when you actually add Aporia to Portkey, when you actually have this combination, what happens is that every single new project that you have automatically gets guardrails against things like hallucinations, prompt injection attacks, data leakage, and so on. And I'm actually very happy to share that, we've actually have a bonus exclusive for Portkey users. So any Portkey user actually gets up to 3 million GRUs in Aporia completely for free. GRUs is the number of tokens times the number of policies that you have. And, Rohit, I think you talked about deterministic guardrails. I think, if we talk about our detection engine, essentially the way it works behind the scenes, we've actually trained small language models, so think 7 billion parameters, 13 billion parameters, and so on. And these models are actually specialized for guardrails. They have really, really, really low latency. So, our inference engine can actually run all of these models in parallel and reach really low latency compared to, building those guardrails from scratch using, GPT-4o or something like that. Now, not only they have really low latency, they also have super high accuracy. So this is also a comparison of precision and recall of different tasks of Aporia compared to, just using GPT-4, not fine-tuned. And then this is actually in both roadmap of, I think, both Portkey and Aporia, but very soon you'll be able to also, run guardrails while the response is streaming to the user. So as the response is actually streaming to the user, Aporia's model will be able to run and kind of fact check the tokens as they're streaming. Cool. So I think we have some time for questions. So I see a couple of questions here at the chat. Let's actually go over them. So Rohit, I think someone here congratulated you in Forbes 30 under 30 very soon or something.
I'm not sure where that's coming from, but okay.
Maybe he has some intel or she, I
That's
don't
fine.
know. Yeah, I think I'll take the first question. So I see a question of is Aporia open source too? So Aporia is currently not open source. The main reason for that is that our models, we essentially constantly updating them. We actually have a team called Aporia Labs, and it's composed out of both cybersecurity experts and data scientists that are constantly adding more types of prompt injection attacks and so on. We are definitely thinking about open source. What's the right model to do that? So yeah. Rohit, do you want to take the second question? Next question?
Yeah. I think the order is a little bit different on my side, but
Sure.
let me try to pick one. Yeah. How can you use AI Gateway to integrate with my agent's orchestration framework? Is it flexible enough in that way, or someone has done this already? Oh, yeah. So the AI Gateway works well with most agent orchestration frameworks. We've got a bunch of cookbooks and guides available. So if you're using, any of the frameworks, Crew AI, LangChain, Autogen, the AI Gateway is already, we have first-class integrations with all of those frameworks as well. Yeah. And I think then let me just pick the other two which are similar, which is Gateway available today with Portkey? I'm assuming the question is Guardrails available today with Portkey? So yes, I think we're rolling out access to different accounts fairly fast, and you should be able to see them in your account soon. I think the other question is the same as well. I can't see Gateway enabled in my Portkey. I'm guessing it's Guardrails. You'll see it soon. Otherwise, just write to us or write to us on our Discord channels, and we'll have it enabled for you first.
Awesome. I think another very interesting question is about the essential components, required to build agents. I would actually really love to hear your response as well to this, Rohit. The way I see, if you're thinking of building an AI agent, there are a couple of components that you absolutely must have. So I think there are four of them. So the first component and the most obvious one is an LLM, right? You need an LLM provider. As long as your agent is kind of conversational, the kind of agents that we just demoed. So this is really the core component. Here you can use OpenAI, Anthropic, open source models, and so on. Second component, it's not always a must-have, but it's very, very common, is to have a vector database. Especially if you have a lot of data, then vector databases are really useful. You can actually build applications that retrieve only the relevant knowledge and put only the relevant knowledge inside a prompt. As I've shown before, really long prompts degrades the accuracy. So having a vector database is highly useful. The third component that's must have, especially for enterprise AI, in my view, is an AI gateway like Portkey. Basically a way to kind of centralize, take control of rate limits, of, virtual keys, all the different things that you need in order to kind of have normal governance around all these AI apps. And then the fourth component is guardrails. You really want to make sure that you don't have prompt injection attacks, hallucinations, and so on. So just to summarize, my list is 1, an LLM, 2, vector database, 3, an AI gateway, and 4, AI guardrails. Rohit, do you have anything interesting to add here?
No, I think this is perfect, right? One thing that I have seen where AI agents go wrong quite a bit is you have one LLM that's probably performing at a 95% accuracy. On one request, it's always a 95% accuracy. But with agents, what tends to happen is you have this error rate that constantly multiplies with the more number of AI requests you're making. Having guardrails is actually a really good way to prevent this error rate from becoming like something like a 30% error rate or a 40% error rate, at which point the agent itself becomes extremely unreliable and users are just not going to have a great experience. So I think more governance is not meant to lock stuff down, but I think just prevents, unforeseen circumstances, and you can build your agents a lot faster, having the peace of mind that, the gateway and AI guardrails are going to make sure that nothing bad happens to the agent itself. So yeah, that's just something I want to add.
Awesome. I absolutely agree. And just another comment here. I've seen many cases of AI apps kind of being shipped to production, but then withdrawn, because of hallucinations, because of security concerns, because of rate limits in the provider. So, if you really don't want to get to a point where you deploy something and then withdraw it from production, these components are really important.
Yep. Maybe I can take the next one. Can virtual keys be attributed to different projects or users? Yes, so Portkey has the concept of workspaces. So you can create different workspaces and have virtual keys attributed to different projects. You could also set up rate limits and budget limits on these virtual keys. But technically, if you want to have more API governance for users, you would create different API keys for users and then link those API keys to virtual keys. So two different concepts in an AI gateway: users and services have API keys, and your AI providers are linked to the gateway via virtual keys. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, another question here was about how is this different than Guardrails repo by Shreya? So I think what's really amazing about this community right now is that, you have so many initiatives, so many people are trying to solve this really big problem of how do you make AI secure and reliable. Many different ways, there are different approaches to solving this problem. So yeah, the Guardrails repo by Shreya is great, and it's another approach essentially. Just another quick one. So is it possible to share the code for the ServiceNow app? Unfortunately, it's not very shareable state, I would say. But if you have any specific question, definitely email me and I can share the details.
Yep. Link to our agent docs. Yeah, I think we'll share it in the chat. So I'll close this out. Then the next one is I use Portkey gateway deployed locally. Can I also deploy and use Aporia guardrail models locally? I let Alon take this, but just to mention, uh, guardrails in Portkey is also available on the open source repo. So if you're using Aporia projects, you can also use Aporia's guardrails in the Portkey open source gateway that you're deploying locally. But yeah, Alon, you can take up the Aporia guardrails on local machines.
Yeah, you cannot deploy Aporia on a local machine right now. However, what you can do is to deploy Aporia to your VPC. So that could be your AWS environment, your Azure environment, or Google Cloud environment. You could deploy our data plane there. And then essentially you can call the Guardrails models from Portkey on your own cloud. So no sensitive data is actually being shared from your cloud environment. Another question here is about procuring Aporia and Portkey separately. Currently, we just announced actually that any Portkey user can actually have 3 million GRUs in Aporia completely for free. So you get a way to kind of evaluate this, test if it works for you, and so on. However, after that, basically the procurement is separate. As of now, maybe we'll have some interesting announcement upcoming, but yeah.
Yep. Cool. Can I use Portkey with a fine-tuned LLM I'm hosting in Hugging Face? Yes, absolutely, Arthur. So you can do that. Portkey supports fine-tuned LLMs. You can also bring your own LLM hosted on completely your own infrastructure. If you just search for BYO LLM, which is bring your own LLM, and Portkey, you should get docs to be able to use any fine-tuned LLMs or custom LLMs using the Portkey gateway. Yeah.
Awesome. And can guards be linked to actions? Meaning, if a guard was hit, I want to inform the human in the loop or send an email or something else. So if by actions you mean something specific, in Portkey or anything like that, I'll let Rohit answer. But one comment I would like to add here is that actually involving human in the loop, having a human in the loop review some of the responses is actually a really good approach. You can actually take this data and then fine tune your models. So I love this approach. And Rohit, is there anything specific in Portkey that?
Yeah. So Portkey logs actually have a way that you can have a human rate the response as well. So a typical workflow would be filter all of the feedbacks that Aporia flagged, and then a human could basically sample through a few of them and see and add further feedback to it as well. So that's the human in the loop approach. What we also want to do is build automated actions such as hitting a webhook or sending an email when the guardrail fails. We're just trying to figure out the right threshold because it shouldn't that people get inundated with emails, but that is something that's definitely on the roadmap.
Are we planning to do an offline event in San Francisco? Actually sounds pretty fun.
Gotta do one, yes.
Sounds pretty cool. Okay, yeah. Let's post something on Luma right now. No, just kidding.
Yep.
Is Portkey integrated with Bedrock?
Yes. Portkey has Bedrock support. We also support Sixt authentication mechanisms with Bedrock. So yeah, I don't know why AWS has Sixt authentication mechanisms, but yes, we support all of them.
I was so surprised when I looked on Portkey docs and saw I think 100 different LLM providers. It's just crazy. Like, how did you build so many providers so fast? Maybe that's a question from my end.
So I think it's taken us a while. Two, we have, I think, a very good community that's building these models. So whenever they don't find something, there are people contributing back to the repo. So we're super grateful for that. And three, I think a lot of the developers in Portkey and even in our community are using AI to very quickly write code on the gateway. So that seems very possible as well.
This is kind of a recursive loop where you write code for the gateway using AI, using the gateway. It's like infinite.
Exactly.
And their engineering team is awesome, definitely. Yeah, a question about the Guardrails. So is 3 million Guardrails available for Portkey AI gateway users? Absolutely. So if you're using Portkey today, you have a lot of credits in Aporia that you can use.
Um, which one? Okay. How can we have action resolution through human in the loop using guardrails to avoid getting agents stuck? Um, I did not understand this question, Alani. Did you get it? Action resolution through human in the loop using guardrails.
Yeah, I didn't understand as well, sorry. But yeah, I think we're kind of out of time. So thank you very much. Let me actually share one last thing here. So if you do want to keep in touch with both me or Rohit, let me share our LinkedIn. Share my screen so you can all see that. Yeah, so here are the QR codes. We love talking about this. We just met 3 weeks ago or something in San Francisco and just talked gateways and guardrails. So if you have any interesting ideas, we would love to hear them, and we would love to engage and build this future together. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in. Excited to see what you build. Bye.
Bye.